by for Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Holmes.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. Welcome in another week, and we're into June, which means we are in full-fledged boating season. We've got recreational boating, we've got floating down the river, we've got paddleboarding, canoeing, and fishing. And Janet, it's busy on the waters of Wyoming.
It is. And, while it might be kind of drizzling rain a few days now and again, or maybe even some big lightning bolts, that doesn't seem to be deterring folks from getting out on the waters. And anything and everything is fair game right now. And we're super glad that everybody is out there and enjoying themselves.
With this year being such a good water year, as it's said, we had good snow melt and lots of rain, and the rivers and reservoirs all have water in it. That means a lot of people are getting out on the water to do their activities, to do things maybe the last couple of years they haven't been doing. But now everybody wants to get on their boat or their canoe or their float and head down the water. But there's something very important that they cannot forget, and that's the AIS situation going on, the aquatic invasive species.
We talk a lot about. Sometimes I wonder, if we're getting the message out correctly. So we're here today to try to do some actual scenarios, Drew, that might help people kind of understand a little bit more about why, when, how you need to get an inspection on your watercraft.
It is a bit confusing because you do have folks that come in from other states that want to recreate or fish here, but you also have folks that just bounce around from waterway to waterway, and they're not real sure if they need to get another AIS inspection. But the bottom line is really anytime you're going on the water, you have to be inspected.
We have our specialists here, our aquatic invasive species coordinator, Eric Hansen, and our fisheries supervisor, Matt Hahn, who are actually very good at dealing with all of these sorts of questions. And so let's throw some scenarios their way and see what they can come up with.
Eric, let's start with you. I know last year things got a little weird toward the end of the year. It was a mandatory checkpoint at the boat ramps at Glendo and Keyhole. This year we're starting out and it's been busy. We've had lots of people out on the water. Have you seen people that have really had issues with any of the AIS checkpoints?
No, actually, I think we're kind of seeing the opposite, Drew. We're seeing a lot of folks that are seeking out that inspection just because of kind of the big push that was created last fall. And, if you were to go on our website, we actually have some rapid response plans that, detail some of these more popular waters and what the situation would look like if they came up with a suspect or positive zebra or quagga mussel detection. And so that was kind of our opportunity to, experience what one of those plans would look like, and also kind of button up those two waters, Keyhole and Glendo, for the fall when we had less inspection presence. But over the winter, we went to the drawing board. We added quite a few positions in the eastern part of the state, opened new border check stations in Newcastle and in Manville at the Three Sisters truck stop. We've been seeing, a fair amount of traffic coming through there, boats that do need inspections. But really today I'd like to kind of clarify, like Janet was mentioning, when do I need a boat inspection in Wyoming, and what does the process look like?
If I'm heading from, say, Glendo to Boise, do I need an inspection at both places, or if I come off Glendo, am I good for Boise?
So the way the regulation is written in Wyoming is if you bring your boat into the state from March 1 through November 30th, it's a mandatory inspection before that craft can launch. And then if you pass an open check station in your route of travel. So most of our check stations are set up at the borders to catch out-of-state traffic, since we do not have zebra or quagga mussels in Wyoming. That's, the main thing we're trying to keep out there, as well as make sure, some of the stuff we have in the state doesn't spread around. That's where our rovers pop up at different locations like Boysen, Pathfinder. So if you were to encounter them on your route of travel, you would still want to pull in and show them that you have an inspection receipt. And if not, you'd go through a quick inspection there with them and get a receipt so you'd be legal on the water. Other than that, if you don't pass a check station and you haven't left the state, you're free to boat within Wyoming waters from water to water.
We just want to remind folks that clean, drain, dry is the aquatic invasive species motto. And even though, you're leaving Glendo and you're heading to Boysen and all of them are negative, we still don't want to be transporting what we might not know is there. We still want to make sure that, people are doing the right thing, because that's what's going to end up saving our waters.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll point out, Janet, there are regulations. If you look in your watercraft regulations, it lists all the aquatic invasive species specific regulations that pertain to all watercraft. And so like in this instance where you leave Glendo and you go to Boysen, let's say you do not encounter a check station. We know there are some invasive species present in Glendo, most recently Asian clam, which is considered an AIS species. And so there is the threat of transporting that species around the state, but the regulations say that you have to remove all plugs from the boat. So your bilge plug, any live well plugs, you have to remove any vegetation or mud from your boat or your trailer before you leave the water, and you can't transport water in your watercraft. So those regulations are designed to really minimize the threat of moving stuff around within the state, knowing full well that if you go from, you're on Glendo today, then you're on Pathfinder tomorrow, then you're on Boysen the next day, you're probably not going to encounter a check station within the state. But if you're adhering to those regulations, you're not moving water, mud, vegetation from body water to body water. And that's really how this stuff spreads around, is in wet, dirty boats.
What could happen? Say somebody is fishing in the morning in Glendo, and they're like, oh, it's not doing right here, we're going to Boysen. And they just take their boat out of the water, they hit the road, they leave the water, in their pump, and their motor still has water in it. What is the worst case scenario that could happen when they get to Boysen?
So worst case scenario with like an AIS that we do have present, Asian clam, for example, in Glendo, their larvae are microscopic and live in the water. They're free floating. So if you had water in a system, it'd be very easy to transport larval clams and spread them that way. And really, I would add to what Janet and Matt said, and, our inspections are less of an inspection and more of a tool to teach people how to keep their boats clean, drain, and dry. And so even if you're transporting your boat within the state, if you're adhering to those same kind of protocols that we do, walk around your boat, check and make sure there's nothing attached to it, clean it off if it is. That's really the best way that we can keep these from spreading. And it really takes an army of, everyone just kind of following the same practices to make that happen.
And I really want to point out that, Game and Fish isn't in the game of ruining people's day or, causing problems. More to educate and to make sure that the fisheries that we have remain the fisheries that we have, and it doesn't change.
You're spot on, Drew. And we had a little taste of it, last fall when South Dakota had found zebra and quagga mussels only 60 miles from our border, right? So kind of a panic hit. We had, very limited personnel. We had to do what we could at that time to best try to keep them out of Wyoming. And so what people experienced last fall is a prime example of what might happen to our fisheries, and might even be closed for a short period of time while we have to deal with some of these invasive species. And as a reminder, depending on what species are introduced, we can't get rid of them once they're here. We're trying to help keep Wyoming open so that we can enjoy everything that we already do about this state.
Well said, Janet. Now, Matt, let me ask you this. So I've been looking for a boat, and a lot of the boats I find are in South Dakota or Colorado. Is it a tough process to get that boat checked when I'm bringing it back?
So yeah, one of the things we see a lot here at the regional office is people that bought boats out of state, and they bring them into the state, and they show up to get registered, and they need an AIS inspection at that time because they did not stop at the border to get one. So one thing people need to remember is those border check stations are open 7 days a week during, April through October, usually with extended hours, and it is required to stop anytime. Any watercraft has to stop. And so the number of boats that we see here that need an inspection at the regional office, they should have already been inspected at the border, but they drove right by the border. And so that can become a problem if nobody's around to do an AIS inspection. We're all out in the field or something like that. It can be a real inconvenience for people, or because you're allowed to run for a period of time on the bill of sale before you even register a new boat. They could set themselves up, say they get checked out at Alcova on the water. There's a potential to be in violation of the AIS rules for several reasons. One, launching without an inspection, but also bypassing a check station on your route of travel. So that's really important that that they do utilize those border check stations. They're all over the borders. All the major highways have them. Like Eric had said, they're open 7 days a week, and really they're there for your convenience as a boater if you're coming into the state.
Reality check here. If you're coming to Wyoming with a boat, you should be checking to find where the check stations are and what you need to do. But where can people find that? Is it on the website?
Yes. So on our website, if you follow the fishing and boating link and go in there and click on AIS, you can get all the information you need to find about check stations, check station hours. We even have private businesses that are certified to do inspections. So if it's not a boat needing a decontamination or something like that, they can get that done at a private business if outside of hours. There's also links on there where they can purchase their AIS decal on their phone or on their computer. So really all that information is there and updated regularly with current check station hours and locations.
Matt, what could happen to the fisheries here if one of these invasive species that we're trying to avoid coming into the state took over, say at a Glendo?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is there could be a lot of possible scenarios, and you'll never really know how it'll play out until you get them. So, for example, there's been some research out of the upper Midwest where they've found reduced growth rates in walleye in zebra mussel infested waters versus uninfested waters. So there's a potential to slow down growth rate on walleye, potentially reduce the primary productivity of that water, which means it can support fewer fish altogether. The zebra mussels can really change the whole food web nutrient dynamics. So, there's a lot less nutrients in the water to begin with because they're filtering it all out, which means there's fewer bait fish, which means you can have fewer predators, et cetera, et cetera. And the severity of how it'll play out is going to really be water specific. And there's no way to predict. I mean, we could see anything from, an imperceptible change in the walleye population to a catastrophic reduction in the walleye population, and anywhere in between. You just don't know. One cautionary thing with that is a lot of the places that have zebra quagga mussels are to the east of us, much lower elevation, far more productive environments, a lot more background nutrients just available to begin with. I would tend to think that, here in Wyoming, high elevation, cold water, not a lot of nutrients. I think the risks are much higher for large scale shifts in fish populations up here than, say, in Minnesota.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Now, Eric, tell us real quick. Again, you're on the ground, you're at these check stations. What are we going to experience, and how long is it going to take to have a check done?
Yeah, so, this last weekend is a great example of one of our busier times of the year. Typically, actually, the last couple of years, Memorial Day weekend's been the busiest at Glendo. And, we were seeing upwards of 120, 130 boats a day. You break that down into an 11-hour day, it's you might be seeing a few boats at the check station when you pull in, but you won't be waiting for a long period of time. Standard inspection takes anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Really, that's about how long it takes for us to fill out our paperwork to get you your receipt and walk through the process with you. And it's also a good opportunity, ask some questions, get out and stretch, talk about the fishing. It's generally a pretty pleasant experience for most folks, and it gets you in and out pretty quick and on the water. So we really try to make sure that we hold people up for the littlest amount of time possible so they can continue on their way and have fun.
Seems like a short amount of time to do your part to keep Wyoming fisheries and waterways pristine and top-notch, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're following those steps to clean, drain, and dry your boat, when you stop in at the check station, a lot of the stuff we're going to be looking for or might need to drain is already going to be done. So that inspection is going to go even quicker, and you've also helped do your part to keep Wyoming waters clean.
Very good. If you have more questions, you can contact Game and Fish or just go to the website, wgfd.wyo.gov.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Here we are already into June, Brian, and that means we're into the season when there's fishing, camping, hiking, outdoor grilling. I mean, it's the perfect time for somebody to come in.
Yeah, and outside of a few afternoon thunderstorms, the weather's been pretty actually nice.
It really has. I went camping this past weekend, came in and got some supplies, got everything ready to go, and it rained. And that was kind of the big bum deal down there was the rain part. But really, I had the containers and everything to keep my stuff dry, and I was fine.
Yeah, well, and it kept the trails dust-free, right?
Yeah. Well, and I was there at Laramie Peak where that tornado was, so we sat and watched that for a little while with a little bit of rain, and luckily it was not too bad.
And going the other direction.
Yeah. And I didn't have to tell Toto we weren't in Kansas anymore. But this time of year also is a good time. We just passed the deadline for the applications, so that means hunting season is just around the corner too.
Yeah, in a couple weeks we're going to know whether or not we drew our big game tags, residents, and our Springer permits, hopefully. So that'll get everybody excited about whether we need to up our game on a new rifle or make sure we've got our ammunition that we need for the season.
Well, and myself, this is the first year that I was able to put in, so I'm going to have to get a rifle and start shooting it and get familiar with it.
I probably should have put in as a party because you're probably going to draw this year.
Probably. Well, let's hope,
Yeah.
But when you come in here to Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I've used more in the last 3 or 4 weeks than I have in a year, but it was the Coleman tailgater that I got here in the store. It works for everything. It's grill, it's griddle, it's just a stove to cook my coffee.
Yeah, and I just picked up the griddle that actually goes on there, so I'm thinking pancakes, eggs, some bacon.
Oh,
yeah, I think it's going to be great.
You can't go wrong with all the different smokers you guys got, too. You just pulled in the Pit Boss and, of course, Traeger.
Yeah, and we just got in the new Traeger pellet. They actually made like a steak rub. It actually comes with a rub and seasonings and whatnot. So there's one that I got my eye on that I'm going to try out this weekend.
Yeah, and of course, speaking of this weekend, if you're going out and fishing, I know earlier in the week the Walleye League kicked off, and now the Stampede is back for this weekend. So there's a lot of guys that are trying to restock from a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, today's our last day of the Stampede tournament. This is the last event that we have at Glendo, and the fishing's been fantastic down here. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the guys fare at the end of the day.
Which we'll talk fishing and, kind of what's going on in that realm in just a few minutes. But here in the store, I know that one of the things that I've been looking at is binoculars, and now's a good time to kind of start eyeing them and studying what you kind of want. Yeah,
the camping supplies have definitely been moving off the shelf pretty well. A lot of the camp chairs, and the one thing that we hear from a lot of people is that we're not carrying the Walmart brand quad chairs and that kind of stuff. When when you're getting from us is you're going to get some quality products that, you're going to buy a chair that's going to last you, for a long time. And it's not going to be that cheap quad chair that you paid $9.99 for and you sat on it, sideways when you had one too many and broke it. So come in and check out what we've got, the cots, the sleeping bags, the tents, that kind of stuff. Now's the time to make sure you've got what you need.
And, of course, if it's anything fishing, they've got the fishing supplies right here, Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. Come on in.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. Drew, along with Brian Woodward from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. And, Brian, fishing is underway, and I know that you've been doing a little fishing to kind of pass the time and take some folks out and enjoy what we have here. And I've noticed a lot of kids that have been out fishing too, because we just had the free fishing day, and a lot of kids are really interested in getting out there. We have a lot of the kids that are, winning awards and whatnot. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, the Wyoming Game and Fish has that, the SLAM or the program, where you can actually kind of target different species. So that's kind of fun. It gives kids, master angler opportunities, and really kind of gives mom and dad an opportunity to get out and experience some different parts of the state and different bodies of water that have different species of fish in them.
So, of course, this is the last day of the Stampede for this round. And then, Jay Fountain has the Walleye League that's been going every Wednesday. So make sure that you get in and kind of check out all the different options when it comes to fishing and all that. Really, every opportunity to get your kid out and get into the water and do some fishing is a good opportunity.
Yeah, and wanted to kind of put a shout out and thanks to the members of the North Platte Walleyes for helping out at the free fishing day at Yesness Pond yesterday. They gave out quite a few fishing poles, a couple hundred anyway. So thanks to those volunteers that supported that game and fish event.
So what are we looking at now? We're in June. The weather's starting to warm up a little bit. Haven't had a whole lot of rain, but we're getting these thunderstorms that are dropping a little bit of water. So really it's kind of hard to gauge how the water's going to look.
Everybody that I've talked to that's been out at pretty much every reservoir in the region is having a lot of good success with catching lots of fish. So the water levels are great, and typically, these reservoirs like Pathfinder, when we come from a low water season to a high water season, that the fishing just tends to be better. And down at Glendo, the fishing is good. The water's pretty stable, so we've got good water levels. It's upper 80%. I don't think that I guess we really don't know what's going to happen with the runoff. There's still more water coming, and there's still a lot of water barreling into Seminole. So we'll eventually see that water kind of work through the Platte system. So, the fishing is just going to be good for a while, and the fish are going to transition, based on what the water's doing. If the water's dropping a little bit, those fish might slide out. And did hear that there's a pretty good troll bite both at Pathfinder and down at Glendo. So really, if a guy wants to pitch a minnow in a jig or a leech in a jig and drag a worm around, I think guys are going to catch fish however they see fit.
When you go to a different setup like that, obviously an angler that's out there to fish, you've got your boat and you've got the rods and reels and setups that you need, but how quick of a changeover is that if maybe you're somebody that is younger in the early stages of fishing? Right.
In terms of knowing when to switch over?
Knowing when to switch over.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just kind of observing what other people are doing, but a lot of it's just kind of following your graph and seeing what the fish are doing and what the water is doing at like Glendo. We've got a lot of weed growth in like a lot of the bays like Elkhorn and Airport and Muddy Bay, and you'll actually see that those weeds actually coming up from the bottom. So you'll eventually see, and it depends on what the water level does as well, but eventually those weeds kind of will get to the surface or maybe be 5 foot under the surface. And then it's just a matter of targeting, your bait, your presentation to be just above those weeds so that you're not snagged up, but those fish can come that are in the weeds chasing minnows, see that bait being pulled over the top of those weeds and attack those.
So, and we've talked a lot about, your setup. You could be going fishing for walleye, but then catch a catfish, or you can catch a sauger, any of this. And when you go out, I mean, that's kind of the idea of starting fishing, is just kind of go out and explore.
Yeah, we talked, I think, last week, there was a group of kids down off of Shelter Point down at Glendo just pitching jigs and twister tails off the shore, and, they caught 10 fish, doing that. So, get out and explore a little.
What have we heard about the river? I know that there are a lot of people in town that are doing some fishing and coming in town. They keep coming in town to do the fishing. And, just driving on the streets of Casper, you see boats all over the city side.
Yeah, I think, this is the time of year where, the drift boat services, and the Crazy Rainbow and Ugly Bug and North Platte Lodge and all those guys that are good, reputable, guide services. I mean, they're busy, and I talked to a guide the other day and said that there's an awful lot of traffic on the upper part of around Gray Reef and down through Lusby. And so they're kind of exploring some different areas, through town even, just to get out of the pressure. Maybe a little bit, fewer fish per mile, but they're being successful. Rumors that the Miracle Mile is fishing fantastic, but the road getting out there is pretty rough right now. So take your time, but there's fish to be had all over this state. So
yeah, get out and do that. And of course, if you have any questions, you have any concerns, you have any equipment that you need to replace because you got mad and broke your last one,
like throwing a golf club, right?
Yeah. Get on out here, check them out. Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. We're back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, remember, if you miss any of our segments or if you miss any of the guests that we have on, you can always hit us up 24/7 online in the My Country 95.5 app and on demand 24/7. Today, we're bringing in Jim Laybourne, who is from JH Bear Solutions up in the Jackson Hole area. And Jim, we appreciate you coming on.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Jim, over the last few years, social media has really hyped up the bear popularity. There are celebrity bears now, and especially up in the Jackson Hole area, the Yellowstone area. And it really has kind of put the bears more in danger, and it's why your organization is really necessary.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. Grizzly preservation has been very successful, and we're starting to see bears in places where they haven't been in a long time. And that's why we are really glad to be able to provide bear-resistant trash cans to people in Teton County, and advice on electric fences, livestock food storage, all of the classic things that get bears in trouble.
Which people don't think that maybe it's as important as it really is for you to lock up your food and your scented items. And because if a bear gets into that, then a bear becomes really comfortable with human things. And that's where the big problem comes in with a lot of these bears, and they have to be dealt with, and not the way we want them to be dealt with.
Yeah, and garbage actually is, the number one problem, classic problem, always has been. When the first visitors were going up to Yellowstone, and the first hotels were built and stuff, they used to just dump the garbage out back, and people would go out at night and watch the bears come in and eat all our scraps. So it's been a classic lure for bears forever, and it's taken a long time, but finally communities outside of the park are starting to secure their garbage, and there's great new products out there. We distribute a can made by Northland Industries called the Kodiak can, and it's really tough. It's been tested by bears. They actually put food, fish, and smelly things that attract bears into it, and they put it into the enclosure with bears at the Grizzly Discovery Center at West Yellowstone. If they can't get into it, then it becomes certified. So it is actually tested by local experts.
Which is a great thing, especially to drive home of how important it is and how much goes into the desire to keep the bears safe and sound in this area. And wildlife is one of those things that people come from all over the world to spot a bear or a moose or an elk in the Jackson area and in Yellowstone. And I know that you live up in that general area, and you see a lot of folks come through and that maybe don't know how to react or interact if a bear happens to be in their sight. And you guys do some really good resources on your website, jhbearsolutions.org, that can kind of make people aware of what they need to do.
Well, not very many people do see a bear. And so when they do, it's pretty thrilling. It can be, a little overwhelming if you're out on a trail or maybe you're out hunting. But the more you try to educate yourself, the less threatening it is, and the more exciting it is. I like to tell people that you don't really have to fear bears, just respect them. And respect them is by understanding who they really are, their kind of behavior, and the real risk. So just the other day, we had a grizzly expert come to Jackson and speak, and he talked about all the different ways that people have died in Yellowstone. And you might be surprised at some of the numbers. So there's documented 7, possibly 8 humans that have been killed by bears in Yellowstone. 7 they know are grizzlies. 1 of them, they're not sure of the species. So in the entire history of Yellowstone, 8 people have died, compared to 11 people that have been murdered.
Wow.
And people that have died of hypothermia, dozens of people that have fell off cliffs while they were, trying to get a selfie or get some shot looking down into the canyon. There's just a million ways that people come to their end. And when he put that up there, it really put it into perspective that, bears have the potential to hurt you, but there's a lot of things that do. You're more likely to get in a car wreck on your way to Yellowstone than you are to get hurt by a bear there.
Which, and that's a great point to put in there, because people automatically fear the bears. Like you said, if you're not educated on bears, you should probably educate yourself in the area, JH Bear Solutions, or in the whole Jackson Hole area, or even Yellowstone. There are experts there that if you have any kind of question or concern about how to, act around bears, boy, you could sure get help before you go out and try to do it on your own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I understand the passion of people that want to see bears. Because I worked as a Yellowstone guide for over a decade, and bears were either 1 or 2 on people's lists of what to see. They wanted to see a bear most, or they wanted to see a moose most, but I tell you, it was pretty much always in the top 5, and nobody ever said, let's keep going, don't stop for that bear. They might say, oh yeah, we've seen enough buffalo today, but people never get tired of watching bears. And part of it's because bears are really big in people's imagination. And so when they actually get to see one and see real behavior of a bear and what it's doing, it's very enlightening, and it's very rare to see any kind of predatory thing. I have seen bears hunt elk calves and catch them successfully. And a couple times I've seen bears chase a deer or something, but most of the time, what you see them just digging up roots, wandering around for, looking for rodents and stuff like that. And then you start to realize that, maybe these animals aren't 24/7 killers.
Right. And, and I think that movies like The Revenant and this Cocaine Bear that was just out that really paint bears in a bad light. I feel that, yeah, they can be mean, they can be big and bad and scary, but like you just said, they're not all 24/7 killers. And Jim, you've had bear encounters and you've dealt with bears. You've lived in bear country. Do you think that people make these bears out to be more celebrities than they should? And it really hurts the bears more than it helps them and brings awareness to them?
Well, it's a mixed bag for sure. It's complicated. Like I said, people want to see them so bad. People drive all the way across the country imagining what they're going to see in Yellowstone. And or the Tetons. And I tell you, when they get to a place and they see a bear, a black bear, a grizzly bear on the side of the road, they've reached their destination of that wild place that they dreamed of, right? they yearned for all summer or all winter when they were working in the office or wherever they are, or in the factory, and they want to get out and experience nature. And when they see a bear and they're like, yes, I made it. I am in a really wild place. This is awesome, And so bear jams can be huge. I'm pretty sure that in all of the records of bear jams in Yellowstone or the Tetons, nobody's ever been injured. But is it stressful to the bear? Oh yeah, no doubt. And some bears don't like it, and they leave. And it can even affect how bears are able to feed. Some bears get pretty used to seeing people, and that's a form of habituation, kind of a neutral form of habituation, but it does affect the bear. Now, I just read a study about bear viewing, like up in Alaska where people go and watch bears fishing for salmon, or bears along the roadside in Yellowstone, even bears in Europe where there's some small bear populations and people see them on the roadside. And they say that from these studies that bears that see people regularly are much less likely to attack people. They realize we're not a threat, right? They see us repeatedly, we're not a threat. Now what's really problematic, and it's a good thing we finally stopped it, is people feeding bears. When I first went to Yellowstone as a little kid, the very first bear I ever saw was one that was being fed on the side of the road. And that's dangerous, right? Once they start making the association of people and food, that's a really bad association. Same thing with garbage. We do take some of the wild out of a bear when they are repeatedly seen on the roadside, like our most famous bear, Grizzly 399. Yeah, she's certainly not as wild as a bear that never sees people. But on the other hand, she is an ambassador for her species. One thing that people are really aware of is that bears are great mothers. Bears are teaching their cubs, playing with them, also extremely protective. People have gotten in trouble that way because, they get too close to the cubs. Don't mess with mom anyway. Any mom, right?
Right.
A human mom is extremely protective of her kids.
So jhbearsolutions.org. How long have you guys been in business? I know you're there to make sure that the relationship between bears and humans stay a bear-human relationship and not buddy-buddy.
Yeah, well, this is a relatively new organization. We've only been around for just a little over a year. It was really started by people who wanted to make sure that as the bear population is growing in the valley and as the human population is growing in the valley, and we could coexist and we could use technology to do that. So Teton County created regulations to ensure that all the attractants were secured to keep bears out of trouble. And so we were formed to help with that primarily, and we want to keep them out of trouble.
That's awesome, Jim. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And I know that you have hunted in bear country. I want to get some hunting tips, and we'll have you back next week for that. Go to jhbearsolutions.org to find out more of how you can help, or, if you want to just learn more about bears, if you're heading up that way, get over there and check it out. Jim, thanks again. We'll talk to you again next week.
Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.